Hey, welcome back. Phil Valentine with you. 1-800-618-PHIL. That's 1-800-618-7445 if you want to join us. Our next guest, Mark Fribos, is a language expert, and I was intrigued by this guy but for several reasons, because I'm intrigued by languages, but also language is a big, it can be a big divider. It can be a big uniter. And we have a problem with language in this country as far as a lot of illegal aliens that come to the country and don't want to learn the English language. And we're starting to have the same problem with as far as Muslims coming to the country and wanting to supplant their culture and their language in this country without assimilating. Thought we'd talk with Mark about that. Mark, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine, Phil. How are you doing today?
Doing great. So how do you think language plays into the politics of all of this?
Well, you know, language is integral to politics, and it's also representative of a culture because languages are basically a product of a culture. So many times, you know, when you talk about language, we seem to think that it's something that isn't really that important, but actually it's very important. And you touched upon two very important issues there, Phil. One was assimilation to America and the importance of English as the mainstream language of America.
Yeah, and you speak several languages, I assume. You're a language expert.
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, Phil, I do. I speak 7 languages fluently, and I come from a family where no one speaks anything but English, and they always kind of wondered what happened to me. Why is it that I decided to go this route? But I tell you the truth, I became a conservative by traveling abroad. I started off by being a little bit more, I was younger, and I went overseas and lived there for a while. And the longer I lived overseas, the more convinced I was that the place I'd come from was the best country in the world. And so I basically am one of the rare, kind of conservative language teachers in the world, and I'm a best-selling author. I'll tell you something. It's interesting how few people understand America abroad, and it's great to be able to explain what this great country is all about in their language, because you can really have a big impact on them, by doing that.
Yeah, and I took my middle son to Europe last year, and we had a great time going around to all sorts of different countries, and France and Switzerland and Austria and Germany, places like this, and we really enjoyed it. But he said when we got back, it really made him appreciate the United States for all that we have.
My father had been in Europe too. The difference is that Dad fought in World War II, and he jumped in Normandy. And he was a product of the Depression. He had never gone to a dentist until he jumped with the 82nd Airborne. He was wounded, got a Purple Heart, and has never taken any benefits from the VA until I forced him to about a week ago because he said the other guys needed it more than him. Now, if we had that type of person in America today and we could repopulate the country with that generation, I'm telling you, I think every one of our problems would instantly disappear. They were a great generation. And I was raised by that, by a wonderful father and a wonderful mother. And I just got to tell you, I love languages and I love cultures, but I also love the United States, and I think this is a great place to be from. And I always try to explain to people around the world what this country is really about, because many people don't understand it, Phil.
No, I know it. And you talked about his generation. I think we have repopulated this country with a lot of folks who are completely diametrically opposed to that. They think that it's an honor to get something and scam the government and get something from the government. And so there's this pride of being able to have swindled the U.S. government to get something out of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. What used to be shameful, for example, my parents always talked about during the Depression, people really didn't have anything. So they'd come up and want to chop some wood or something, and they'd speak with my grandmother, and they'd say, "Can I do some work for you?" And she said, "Well, I'll give you a cup of coffee and a sandwich right now if you'd like." And no, I'm not taking any handouts. I don't want any charity.
Right.
It was a shameful thing back in those days, Phil.
Oh, I know. There's no more shame involved in it.
No, it's considered to be okay to, pick somebody else's pocket, spread it around. And every time they talk about that, I say, well, why don't you spread yours around first?
Yeah, no kidding.
I think it's important for people to be able to work and enjoy the fruits of their own labors. The harder you work, the luckier you get. I think that's what America's all about. America is a meritocracy. And I think we should spend our time thinking about that. I have a friend, for example, if you just let me mention this for a second. I noticed on your website that something about TN, I believe it was something about taxes with Tennessee.
Right.
That I thought was very interesting. I've got this friend named Greg Tischer who's got this program called TaxTNT.com. I'm telling you, this guy it actually shows you how to get your money back from past taxes that you lost to the government. Now, that's not something that's unusual, and it's pretty cool at taxtnt.com. But having mentioned that, I want to get back to this language thing and tell you that anybody can learn how to speak a language quickly and easily, but what you have to do is have the right technique. You got to have the right method to do it, and then it's a great experience. And I think great Americans of the past have learned languages, like Benjamin Franklin. He spoke quite a few different languages, and if he hadn't known the language of France, we probably would have never won the revolution.
That's right, because he was over there negotiating and getting those folks to help us. Well, let's talk about that, because I've tried to learn German. I have learned a little bit, just enough to be dangerous, and some of it comes back to me when I go to the German-speaking countries like Austria and Germany. But I find that it's a difficult thing to just lodge all of that in my mind and become fluent in it. But you're saying that anybody can learn a language.
Absolutely. Anybody can learn a language. In fact, you can learn more than one language, Phil. And I'm going to give you a couple of tips right now on how to do it. First of all, don't believe everything you hear on these infomercials about learning a language on a computer. And I'm not trying to cut people down, but there's a big scam right now. The average American has more money and less language experience than any language consumer in the world. There are $83 billion in the language product market right now being thrown around, and people are spending a lot of money on language products throughout the world. Americans need to know that anybody can learn how to speak any language almost for free nowadays, or for inexpensive, not paying very much money. One thing to keep in mind, you mentioned about accumulation. You've got to structure your lifestyle on learning a language. You've got to have good audio programs ready for you in your car, so that when you hit a traffic jam, you're grateful for it. You're happy to be waiting for a train because it provides you with a language learning opportunity. You see, you've got to take these down times and turn them into language up times. And the way you do that is by structuring your life around being able to accumulate this language. Because it takes a while to get a language down, as you mentioned, Phil.
But it's almost like, and I think we've heard from some of the experts out there that say the full immersion is the best way for somebody coming to this country to learn the language. This is sort of like partial immersion, but whenever you get a chance, you immerse yourself in this language, right?
That immersion's been thrown around. I'll be honest with you, I even had an immersion program that I put together in my behind-the-wheel Spanish, French, Italian that I sold to Macmillan Audio. I believe in America, so I started my language program in my home, and I sold it out of my garage. And it was so successful, I ended up selling it to Macmillan Audio of New York. I got the opportunity to go toe-to-toe with the big guys. I couldn't have done this in any other country but the greatest country in the world, which is the United States of America. Having said that, the idea of immersion that they're using a lot right now, to get true immersion, Phil, you got to go to the country. You basically have to be thrown into a situation where nobody speaks the language that you speak, and then you're truly immersed, okay?
Right.
Now, like you mentioned, you can get a partial immersion, but you're not going to get it on a computer in front of that isn't real immersion. Looking at 4 pictures on a screen is not immersion, in my opinion. You've
just got to be inundating yourself with this at every down moment, is what you're saying.
Yes, inundate it, get yourself a language net, but then another thing is the memory technique, Phil. It's very important. If your language program, and many of the popular computer programs don't have an interval learning system, and I got to point this out to you. A guy by the name of Hermann Ebbinghaus at the end of the 1800s, sorry, but this is what I do for a living. I don't want to get too technical, but he brought up the forgetting curve. And basically what he said is, if you don't review at certain intervals, you're going to forget whatever you learned. You're going to forget 90% of it in no time at all. So what you have to do is, at certain intervals, you've got to review that material, and then you dramatically increase your retention. See, language, Phil, is all about memory. If you don't remember it, it doesn't do you any good. So while you're accumulating it during your downtime, another great way to enhance your language memory is to make sure that you have a system built in to the product that teaches you the language in an interval-based basis. For example, if I teach you a language, like if I were to say right now, ich kann, okay, that means I can in German, right? Ich kann Deutsch sprechen, I can speak German. Okay, if you were to say that, and then 5 seconds later review it, you already increase your chances of remembering it dramatically just because you reviewed it 5 seconds later. Then you go back and review it again, another 30-second interval, your retention goes up. And then you do it again in like a 3-minute interval. It just really ups your chances or increases your chances of remembering the language. So
maybe people just try to remember too much at one time when they should be taking small nuggets of this and memorizing all of that and then moving on, right?
True. Exactly. And then what you do learn, you've got to be able to have it kind of come back to you in a review form, and after a while you internalize it, then you won't forget it, and as long as you review it, like annually or something. But at first, you've really got to have those intervals down. The good language programs, the one I made was Behind the Wheel, and that comes with Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese. Another good one is Pimsleur. Paul Pimsleur has a great interval method. The popular, I read an article about Rosetta Stone. They don't evidently have a really good interval system built into their method. But, all methods work to a point. Just like you can go from Chicago to L.A. on a horse, you may not get there quickly, but you'll get there eventually. The idea is let's get a good method in there and use it during our downtimes. That's what I highly recommend you do.
Oh, good. And I'm going to send these folks to your website. Your website is markforbols.com?
Well, it's Frobos.com.
Just Frobos.
F like Frank, R-O-B-O-S-E. To and fro and Bose headphones, yeah.
Let's get back to the politics of this. I mean, we've got now, with all the thing with the Ground Zero Mosque and the rest of it, and a lot of things, a lot of it, of course, religion is a divider, but language is a divider too. There are a lot of these people that are coming to America that just really don't want to learn English and don't want to assimilate and don't want to be part of this culture.
Exactly. See, the United States has to have a common language, or what the Romans called a lingua franca, in other words, a common tongue, because a nation of immigrants can only be united by a tongue, by a language that we all understand. Now, I am a promoter of foreign languages. Understand, I love speaking languages, and I'll speak them anywhere in this great land because I have the freedom to do so. However, we all have to be able to communicate with one another as Americans, and one of the few elements that we have that really unites us as a people is our common language. Those individuals that come that say they refuse to speak English are doing themselves a huge disservice, first of all, because they're freezing themselves into a permanent underclass. Bilingual education programs have been proven to freeze Latino students into a permanent social and economic underclass. They're not. What language do they speak in Harvard? What language do they speak at the University of Illinois?
Right.
Some of the greatest universities in the world, they don't speak Spanish.
So what should we do? We should throw these kids in with the rest of the folks, and because I have heard, I had a guy who said that he came here when he was 16. He was German, and he was talking to me on the radio. He speaks perfect English. He said within the first semester he was making D's. Second semester he was here, he was making A's, and he never had an English as a second language experience. They just threw him in the classroom and he picked it up.
Absolutely. In fact, I couldn't agree with you more, Phil. You and I are on the same page. I taught in a high school for years that did not have a bilingual program. The kids would come from all over the world. I'm talking about from Singapore, Malaysia, China, Mexico, everywhere. And within one semester of being mainstreamed, and I'll grant it was a heck of a semester, but they were speaking English. They were mainstreamed very quickly. At the end of the year, these kids were fluent in English. Well, in comes the bilingual program. Suddenly they're doing bilingual. And at the third year of high school, the driver's ed teacher comes up to me and he says, you know what? None of these students now can even tell right from left. We almost got into a wreck just now because they don't even know right from left in English.
Because we've given them a crutch.
Dramatic. Pardon me?
We gave them a crutch.
Yeah.
Instead of making them learn.
Right. And you know who gets hurt more? It's not us.
It's
Believe
them.
Me, honest to God, it's them.
That's
and
right.
then we have a big problem because, see, they're not participating because of this liberal dream of we're all going to be the world and we're going to speak our different languages, which I applaud, by the way. I speak Spanish at home. I speak different languages in my house. No problem. But what I'm trying to say is everybody speaks English, okay? In other words, we speak fluent English because we have to participate in this wonderful country, and the way you do it is by speaking English. Also, English is the world's most important language in terms of business. The world's most spoken language is Mandarin Chinese. But the language that everyone in the world is clamoring, Phil, to learn is English.
That's right.
So isn't it surprising that people who have fought so hard to come here have been denied access to the very thing that could make them most successful? I view that as being very racist in a way. It's like a linguistic racism. Absolutely.
Well, you can learn more, folks, out there, and if you want to learn another language, Mark can help you with that. Frobos.com, is that right?
That's right. And the name of the program is Behind the Wheel. You can order it anywhere. Order it on Amazon.com, wherever. It's available everywhere where you can download music or buy audio CDs.
Excellent. Mark, a fascinating conversation. Appreciate you sharing that with us.
This was my pleasure, Phil, and have a great day. Thank you very much for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure.